Hello all, I'm Sai and in today's video, I am bringing to you my spoiler-free review and spoiler-filled discussion of The Tattooist of Auschwitz by Heather Morris. First, I want to apologize to you guys for being so late with this review. I wanted to bring this earlier in the channel, but I could not make myself write the script for this video because this is a book which I read very fast, but also it is one book which weighed on my soul a lot because so many horrible, tragic things happen in this book, and I did not want to go back and relive all the things that I read from the book for the first time. And that's why it's been so long for making this review and putting it out to you guys. And also I want to say that this is not going to be a very long video as I did for Samsara. I'm going to try and keep it as much short as I can. The first few minutes will be spoiler free for people who have not read the book, and the spoiler filled discussion section I'll not discuss in depth because I don't want to go back and talk about all the tragic things that happened here. I have a few points which I'd like to discuss, but apart from that, I'm not going to dive deep into anything because I know that it will affect a lot of people mentally. So without any further ado, let's get into the various parts of the review right away. Starting with the plot, we follow our main character, Lale, who's taken from his hometown along with a lot of other Jewish people to the concentration camp at Auschwitz in 1942, if I'm not wrong, and all the things that happened there inside the concentration camp for Lale as well as all the other prisoners inside the concentration camp is the actual plot of this book. How he goes to the camp, gets branded with a tattoo which reduces him to just a number, and after that how he gets to become the tattooist of the camp at Auschwitz, and through that how he helps a lot of people inside the camp while also finding the love of his life in one of the most horrible places on earth and also during one of the most horrible times on earth is the actual plot of this book. And more than all these things, it is the real life story of this person named Lale and how he has narrated his story to this author Heather Morris, who has written it in the form of this book. It feels very sad to know that all these things actually happen to people inside the camp, and this particular person who has lived through all this stuff and is strong enough to just say it out to the world so that it does not happen again in the future just makes it very heart-wrenching. So if you're going to read this book, you need to have a thicker skin because there are a lot of horrible things that happened to the people just in the past century, and all of those things being reiterated by one person who lived through them to us. So in order to stomach all that, you need to keep yourself ready. And if you are at a sad place or bad place in your life right now, please don't read this book. Otherwise, you need to try this one because it'll just show you how much bad the world was back then and how much more we have evolved as a species right now. Next, talking about the characters. The first character whom we follow throughout the story is Lale himself, who's the tattooist of Auschwitz. And then we have his love, Gita, whom he finds within the concentration camp. And the way in which their love is just developed to us by the author is so beautiful, okay? They don't get to spend that much time with each other, but the way in which they develop their relationship and understand each other is extremely out of the world to just read and experience. Apart from them, we also have Gita's two friends and this other character named Silka, who has her own book named Silka's Journey that is a companion for this one. After both of those books, there is this other book named Three Sisters, which is actually the story of Gita and her two friends. Apart from all these characters, we also have some other characters who keep on helping Lale and Gita throughout their journey and also get some help from them. There is this very horrible Nazi doctor character whom we see inside the story, and he is one of the worst characters that I've ever read so far in my life. I'm just giving you the characters whom we see for most time inside the story and exploring all the others who weave in and out of the story during multiple instances in order to not confuse you. And the way in which both of these main characters, Lale and Gita, are fleshed out is super awesome because they are actual people, okay? It's the life story of two people, and the way in which the author has set their story to us through their own voice is really beautiful. Next, talking about the setup, okay? And I think more than anything, this setup and the things that happen here are the most important part of this book and not the story of Lale himself, because we are able to see that each and everything that is happening inside this book has happened inside a concentration camp, and how horrible a place it is on earth and how horrible people have been treated by other people inside these camps is just so heartbreaking to read. The author clearly shows us the layout of the camp and what are all the things that are happening here, how the people are treated inside the camp, what kind of food that they eat, the kind of clothes that they are given to wear, the total lack of hygiene that they are allowed to experience inside the place, the constancy of massacre that is looming over their lives at each and every instant they are inside the camp, the continuous torture that is being experienced by each and every one of the people, no matter whom they are inside the camp, as long as they are prisoners, and the amount of politics and bribery that is also happening inside the camp so that some people can safeguard themselves if they can exchange certain other things with the people who are in charge of the camp. And above all, the amount of physical and mental abuse each and every one of these people who has been trapped inside the camp has experienced for those 3 to 5 years they have been put inside the place. All these just make it such a depressing and real setup for the book, and I think the author just succeeded immensely by bringing it to us because it is such a hopeful story, and the reason why it feels so hopeful is because it is put inside such a hard environment, and if the author had not provided the proper setup in order to make us feel the environment where the story is taking place, I don't think we'll be able to get that much hope out of the story. So overall, I can say that even though it is such a hopeful book, it is set up in such a depressing place, and you need to look out for all the trigger warnings before you go forward and read this book. Next, talking about the writing. The writing of the author is one of the strongest pillars for this book because the author does not shy away from any of the atrocities that she is addressing inside the book. Okay, she just states them as such in vivid terms so that we can picture them properly and understand or try to understand what kind of torture these people have been through while they were inside the camps and how it was actually made to them by other people who are also living along with them. She even states some very explicit scenes just as such from the camp, and while I was reading them, I was not able to continuously read them at all because my brain was not able to take in all that information, which was very, very graphic in its tone. I'm not at all saying that they are not necessary for this book. They are necessary, and I'm saying them because anyone who wants to go forward and read that needs to be ready in order to experience it, because no matter how much ready we might be or how much we might think that we are ready to read this book, there is so much more horrible things that are happening inside the book which can make our heart just stop for a second and make us feel so sad, bad and depressed because it has happened to people just like us out there in the world and just within the last century itself. And the strange thing is that once you keep on reading it, you will just want to know what's going to happen towards the end because it does not seem like any of these things can have an happy ending itself, but that's the actual point of the book. The author actually gives us hope through these characters and the stories that their lives tell, that no matter how hard things get, if we keep hope and keep trying, because that's the only thing that we can do, there's a huge probability that everything can turn out well. And I think the author's writing was optimistic in that way. So overall, I'd like to say that I rated this book 5 stars without any doubt because it just made me feel so many things that I've never felt before while reading any of the books that I've read so far in my life. And personally, I should say that being from India, I did not know about all these horrible, explicit things that happened inside the concentration camps because it is not part of our history. And for some reason, just because it's not part of our history, we have not been educated about it in our system, which is a very wrong thing. Certain happenings like this one need to be educated to people all across the world, no matter who they are, because we don't know what can turn and make people do certain things during times of war. And something like this should not happen ever in the future because it should not happen in the first place all those years back. And not to control that and take measures to stop that from happening ever at all, people need to be educated by it. People need to be made aware of all these stories properly so that for no reason they take a choice in order to harm generations together. I just felt so emotionally drained after reading this book, but I also felt so good because it is such a wonderful book and I felt so glad that I read it even though it consumed a lot of my mental energy. So that's it for my spoiler-free review, and now I'm going to dive into spoilers. The first thing which bothered me the most while I started reading the book itself is how these people were treated by the Nazis, okay? How they were just snatched away from their homes and taken to the concentration camp, which itself is the most horrible place on earth during that time. And even while being taken there, they were not treated like human beings at all. They were just taken these freight trains, if I'm not wrong, which are used to carry cattle across countries, and how they were all just put together in congested places and just transported from their hometowns into the concentration camp without any kind of empathy at all. And using empathy for any act that happens inside this book is totally out of sense because people who can empathize with other people would not have made all these things happen, yet it has happened in the past. And how their bodies have been violated after they get into the camp. For example, their heads are just filled up and their hair is just chopped off, and they're given a meager amount of clothes that they can wear, which is not even that comfortable for them. And most of all, they don't get enough food to eat. Okay, it's not even the bare minimum amount of food that they can receive in order to keep their bodies just nourished and not even healthy. All those things are just so horrible, and I personally think that all those things should not have happened, and putting all those things in the beginning itself just showed us how worse this is going to get and how horrible these people have been treated in the past. The author also made a great decision to show how Lale is the main character for the story, because it was shown to us that he's kind of a special person and he's kind of the chosen one for this place because things happen surrounding him and he does not let them affect him in any way because he knows that if he lets those things affect him, he'll not be able to provide the help that he's expected to provide for the people who are surrounding him who need help. And even when the tattooist sees him and takes him as the assistant so that he can become the next tattooist, it's clearly shown to us that he's the only person who is mature enough to handle this job because he knows that he's been hurt while he got the tattoo. So he'll make sure that he does not hurt anyone else in the process while he is going to tattoo them in the future. And he also keeps up that promise and always tries to give the tattoos to the people even though they are not willing to take it in the most genuine and human form possible. There are also multiple instances during which some people are trying to protest to the Nazis in very small micro ways and how he tries to just save them from the aggression that they might receive for their rebellious acts, even though they cannot be considered as rebellion because it's just a normal reaction that any human will have, and how all those small things from Lale has helped a lot of people to just save their lives because of some petty things that might happen from the end of the Nazis was really, really good to me. The fact that all these prisoners have been united and care about each other despite the amount of hardships that they are experiencing inside the camp was very, very astonishing for me to read because when we are put into situations like that, the only people who can help us or empathize with us and understand what we are going through are the people who are surrounding us going through the same kind of hell. And that was clearly shown by the author in a very, very true form here if you ask me. There's this particular sequence inside the book when Lale gets ill and he's to be mistaken as a corpse and taken and burnt with all the other corpses in the crematoriums. But he ends up being saved by his fellow prisoners and he's kept in secrecy and fed by them and taken care of for like 1 week to 10 days. And how they even pulled it off for that longer time without getting recognized is something which just made me think a lot because he's a person who's not dead, but it makes us feel like it would be better for him if he's dead rather than just survive like this because that is a very horrible place. And despite that, all these people who are just struggling to keep themselves alive are also trying to save this other person who is just going through all the same things that they are. But they don't give up on him. They keep on trying and keep on trying to save him. And as a result of it, we just get to see this amazing person who's just a survivor more than anything, who lived long enough to tell his tale to the world and show all these atrocities that were committed during that time. Some of the very bad things that the Nazis did were just shown to us as small scenes here and there inside the book. Of those, the one which affected me a lot in the beginning itself was how a person is just shot dead for peeing, okay? He gets out of the camp during the middle of the night and he just goes squats and he just wants to urinate. And during that time, one of the soldiers just shoots him dead and after shooting him, they just laugh out loud. And that was the point during which Lale himself feels that this is just going to be literally hell for each and every person who's living there. And the one thing he needs to be focused on compared to anything else is to survive, and it does not matter how he survives for him. He's not going to go forward out of his way and harm anyone in order to keep himself alive, but he's also not going to give up his life just because he feels angry or he feels frustrated for some of the things that happen in there. Even though it's very, very normal and very, very understandable that he might get tense and might get angry for so many of the atrocities that are happening there, how he chooses to keep all those feelings inside himself just because he needs to be alive just shows us how much of a survival spirit he has more than anything inside the story. And that is the main thing which just kept him alive in order to tell his story out to the world so that he can be a huge reason why something like this never happens anytime in the future also. We also get to see how these Nazis are being bribed by some of the prisoners in there through some goods that they receive from some cleaning duties that they do or some other duties that they do outside. We also see Lale exchanging chocolates with this woman who's in charge of the place where all the women are kept inside the camp, and how he uses those chocolates to bribe his way through Geeta and try and meet her each and every time. And it's not like Geeta as well as Lale get a lot of time to spend with each other. They get very meager amounts of time, which is very, very short. And even with that short amount of time that they spend with each other, they try and understand each other so very well. And the love for them is rooted so deep that it does not make them leave the other person no matter what happens, even after they get out of the camp. If you ask me, it's just pure magical to see how they find each other after they get out of the camp because it is totally during different times. And there's no way in which they can know where the other person is. But despite all those things, I think life just brought them together because of their mutual love for each other. Throughout this book, we get to see that there are huge groups of people who keep on being taken from the camp and then just killed off and incinerated in the crematoriums continuously. And there's this particular sequence during which a group of gypsy people are just taken away from the camp and they are going to be killed. And they also know that they are going to be killed and incinerated then and there inside the crematoriums, and nothing but their ashes is going to remain after just a few more hours. It's not like they had a completely different life a few hours back, but they were alive and they knew that anytime they could die in the future, and that happens to them in just a few hours is just very depressing to read. And this particular scene during which Lale himself goes forward and talks to a gypsy woman whom he has known for a few days inside the camp, and how she just accepts her death more than anything, because there's no other thing they can do as a huge group, because even if they rebel, they are going to be killed. If they are not going to rebel, they are going to be taken as a group and be massacred together and then burnt off. So either way, they don't have a better way out of this compared to death, and how they just embrace it and accept it. And when the woman tells to Lale that it is not his fault and there is nothing he can do in order to prevent them, that's a point during which I was able to strongly feel that all these things should not have happened at all. Okay, it should not have happened to any people, no matter how bad they were. And if you ask me, the kind of treatment that these people were going through inside the concentration camps are suitable only for people who actually created the camp and made all these things happen, and not the people who actually went through all those tortures. So that just weighed on my heart so much. Finally, I want to talk about this last scene which we get inside the book, which is narrated by Lale and Geeta's son to us after their deaths. And there's this particular passage in which he tells about when they have just lost their home because of some financial issues. And when he gets home after school, there's this particular day during which their entire home is being packed up, and Geeta is actually packing up their belongings and just singing a song in a very, very happy way. And when he goes and asks his mother, that is Geeta, how she is so happy and unaffected when everything that they have, including their home, is going to go away from them right now, she tells him that once a person can survive after knowing that they might not exist the next day or just a few hours after their existence right now, nothing affects them that much, because this life is much better compared to what they lived in the concentration camps. And that just resonated with me so much, and it made me think that there is nothing that is constant in the world, and there is nothing which is confirmed in the world too. So all we can do is hope for the best and make the best out of the present that we have. Anything can happen to us in the next minute. Anything can happen to us tomorrow. We might not be alive for the next minute. At the same time, we may not be alive tomorrow to experience the day also. So that doesn't mean that we have to be depressed. We need to fear the future and just live our lives in a frightened way. We can just have hope and try to make the best use of the present moment. And that's basically the philosophy of this whole book, right? No matter what happens, as long as you don't lose hope, there's always a probability that everything will end in the right way for you. And I think that is a greatly optimistic way of seeing such a horrible story and taking it as an inspiration to live the lives that we have, which is much more comfortable and much more livable, and make the most use of it. So yes guys, that's it for my spoiler-free review and spoiler-filled discussion of The Tattooist of Auschwitz by Heather Morris. The review for the next book chat book, The Picture of Dorian Gray, will be out pretty soon. I think will be out in like a couple of weeks or so. So do watch out for that. And I'll also announce the next book pretty soon in the channel. So if you did enjoy watching today's video and found it useful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and also share it to your friends. If you want to get more content from me, do subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching and have a great rest of your day.